My name is Eliza Monroe, and I live in a pale blue house on Willow Lane, nestled in the sleepy town of Marlow, Massachusetts. It's the kind of place where autumn leaves pile like rusted gold in the gutters, and neighbors wave from their porches with coffee in hand. On the outside, my life probably looks pleasant, ordinary, maybe even enviable. But at night when the lights are low, and silence begins to creep in like fog through the windows, my stepmother scares me. Not in the way children fear the dark, but in the way animals know when a predator is near. Her name is Margaret. She came into our lives 2 years ago like a slow-moving storm elegant, poised, charming in all the ways that make men ignore the thunder that follows. My father, Gregory Monroe, met her during a logistics conference in Chicago. He was the CFO of a mid-sized transportation company, respected, logical, far from reckless. But something about Margaret bypassed his reason. Within months, they were married in a private ceremony at a lodge in Vermont. I hadn't even met her until the week before the wedding. At the time, I was 24, living at home while I wrapped up my master's in literature at Boston University. It wasn't where I expected to be at that stage in my life. But grief has a way of halting progress. My mother had passed away 4 years earlier, and after everything unraveled, I just never left. Home was safe, or so I thought. From the beginning, Margaret brought with her a certain coldness, the kind that a fireplace can't soften. She wasn't overtly cruel, and she never raised her voice. But there was a heaviness to her presence, a constant awareness of being watched. She had a way of lingering in doorways, of listening from just behind the next room. When she smiled, it was too deliberate, too polished, like she had learned it in a mirror. It was a few months after the wedding when the nightmares began. Or rather, when I started waking at the exact same time each night, to 47 a.m. Always to 47. At first, I thought it was stress or a bad sleep cycle. But it kept happening. And with it came something worse. My room faces the backyard, and there's a single security light that flickers on and off when the wind catches it just right. One night, lying in bed after waking again at 47, I saw a shadow move across my wall. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but the shadow stayed too long. It didn't move like tree branches. It moved like a person. The next night, I left the door to my room cracked just slightly. I kept my eyes open, pretending to sleep. That's when I saw her dot Margaret, standing in the hallway, motionless, staring at me. She didn't flinch when I sat up. She didn't even try to explain. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "You sleep so heavily, Eliza. You should be more careful." I didn't know how to respond. I couldn't tell if it was a warning, or a threat, or something worse. My father, of course, was oblivious. He worked late most nights, always pushing to meet quarterly deadlines, traveling often to New York or Atlanta. When he was home, Margaret transformed into some 1950s vision of a perfect wife baking pies, setting the table just so, laughing too loudly at his corny stories about company retreats. He adored her. I tried not to see that as his failure. But there were other things. I started overhearing late-night phone calls from the guest bathroom. Once, I passed by and heard her whispering about the deed and policy figures. Then I heard my name. That's when my nerves turned into a knot in my stomach that wouldn't let me eat or sleep. I needed proof. I found a secondhand security camera on Craigslist for $120. Caleb would have told me not to trust electronics from strangers, but I didn't care. I just needed something to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I hid the camera behind a stack of books on my dresser, angled toward the hallway. For 2 nights, nothing happened. But on the third, I woke at 47 again, and in the morning, I checked the footage. There she was, not just in the hallway. She was inside my room, standing next to my bed. I watched myself sleeping oblivious, vulnerable while Margaret whispered words I couldn't make out and stared down at me with a look that didn't belong in the realm of love or family. It was almost clinical, like she was taking inventory. That morning, I decided I wasn't going to let fear keep me paralyzed anymore. Something was wrong with Margaret. Deeply wrong. I didn't know what her endgame was, but I could feel it circling. And if I didn't act, it would eventually close in. I couldn't talk to my father. Not yet. He would think I was being dramatic. He'd tell me it was stress from school, or maybe grief resurfacing. But I knew the truth wouldn't sound believable without proof. I needed someone who wouldn't gaslight me. Someone who had the instincts and tools to help. That's when I thought of Caleb. We hadn't spoken in a year, not since I ended our relationship. Not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't think I deserved him at the time. He had always been the kind of person who trusted his gut, who asked the right questions, and never let the wrong people get too close. He had gone into private security work after leaving the army, and last I heard, he had opened a small agency out of Providence, Rhode Island. I stared at my phone for almost an hour before typing out the message. I need a favor. And before you say no, know this, it's about my stepmother. She's not who she says she is. I hit send and stared out the window, the wind rattling the branches against the glass. I didn't know what I was hoping for, maybe just someone to tell me I wasn't going crazy. But Caleb didn't write back. He called, and that's when everything began to unravel. I didn't expect him to respond so quickly. In truth, I wasn't even sure if the number still worked. Caleb and I hadn't spoken since we broke up just over a year ago amicably, technically, though there's no such thing as clean exits when you carry old pain like heavy luggage. I had sent the message without expectations, driven more by instinct than logic, by the kind of dread that simmers beneath the surface of sanity. But 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Caleb, I'm on my way. Be there in 3 hours. Don't tell anyone I'm coming. Just like that. It didn't matter that we hadn't spoken in 12 months. Caleb had always been the kind of man who showed up when you needed him most. Sometimes before you even realized you needed anyone. His messages were rarely long. No fluff. No panic. Just presence. I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I typed a single word. Okay? 3 hours. That was enough time to pretend it was just another morning. I put on a pot of coffee, cracked open two windows to let the cold October air in, and paced through the house to make everything look normal. Or, at least, functional. I even turned on the news, though I didn't hear a word of it. All I could hear was the hollow ticking of the kitchen clock and the echo of my own heartbeat, thudding like a slow drum beneath my ribs. Margaret came downstairs around 9. She wore her usual morning robe, the deep maroon velvet one that looked like it belonged in a European opera house, heavy and dramatic and far too luxurious for everyday wear. She never looked rushed, always so composed, so assured. It made my skin crawl. You're up early, she said as she floated into the kitchen, her voice light and casual. She began preparing her chamomile tea with robotic precision. 1 silver spoon of honey, no lemon, never lemon. Bad dreams again. I kept my back turned to her. Something like that. The way she smiled without making a sound unnerved me more than anything else. I didn't need to see her to know she was watching me. She always was. She carried her tea to the living room and turned on the classical music station she loved, the one that played mournful violin pieces and eerie piano concertos. The kind of music that made the whole house feel like a museum after closing hours. After a few minutes, she called out to me, almost offhandedly, "Oh, by the way, the lawyer called yesterday. Your father's updating the will again. He said something about simplifying things." My chest tightened. I turned to look at her. Simpler for who? She didn't look away. She just sipped her tea and smiled that smile I had come to despise. For everyone. At exactly 11:38 a.m., I heard the low hum of an engine outside. I moved quickly to the back door and opened it just as the charcoal gray Ford Explorer pulled into the driveway. Caleb stepped out wearing that same worn leather jacket I remembered from our road trip through Maine. He hadn't changed much. His jaw was sharper, maybe. His beard a bit thicker. His eyes, though they were the same, clear, grounded, searching. "You look tired," he said as he stepped through the threshold. "You eating it all?" "Not really," I admitted, managing a weak smile. "Kind of hard to eat when you feel like prey." He didn't laugh. He just nodded. We walked through the kitchen and into the den, where I had my laptop waiting. I showed him everything. The nighttime footage I had recorded. Margaret's silhouette in the hallway. The way she entered my room without hesitation. The whispering barely audible, but undeniably real. Caleb watched every second in silence, his hands folded, his brow tense. When the final clip ended, he leaned back in the chair and stared at the wall for a moment before speaking. "You know what this looks like, right?" he said finally. "This is planned. This is methodical. It's not paranoia. It's control." I swallowed hard. "I know." He looked at me. "You said something about insurance." I told him what I'd overheard that one night weeks ago when I passed the guest bathroom and heard her whispering on the phone about deeds, payouts, and then, unmistakably, my name. That was when the pieces started to fall together. Slowly, painfully. Caleb opened the leather bag he'd brought with him and pulled out a slim black notebook. He began jotting notes. "I'll dig into her records. Public databases. Property records. Any aliases she's used. Previous marriages. If she's done this before, we'll find it." That afternoon, while Margaret was conveniently out running errands, Caleb made a call to an old friend of his in Hartford who worked in county real estate archives. Within the hour, he had something. She used to live in upstate New York. Name at the time was Margaret Calloway. Married a guy named Roger. He died in a house fire in 2017. Guess what? He looked up from his notes. She was the sole beneficiary of a $450,000 life insurance policy. I felt the blood drain from my face. And before that, he continued, flipping a page. She was Lisa Warner, married to a dentist in London, also dead, drowned in a boating accident. She collected £310,000. I leaned against the wall, dizzy. "She's done this before," I whispered. "More than once." Caleb stood and zipped up his bag. "She's a black widow, Eliza, and your dad's next. But she didn't expect you to pay attention." "I think I'm in her way," I said. "I think that's why she comes into my room." He nodded grimly. "Then we don't wait. I'll stay tonight. I've got my own cameras, audio mix. We'll catch her in the act. And if she catches you?" I asked, heart pounding. "I don't scare easy," he said. "Not when it comes to protecting you." That night, I told Margaret I was feeling tired and planned to go to bed early. She gave me that too perfect smile again and said, "Sleep tight." But something in her voice sounded final, like a curtain falling before the last act. Only this time, I wasn't alone in the dark. The hours before midnight passed like molasses slow, thick, oppressive. Every tick of the clock felt louder than it should have. Every breath I took seemed too sharp, too deliberate. The plan was simple. Pretend to sleep, stay still, and let the trap spring. Caleb had outfitted my room with his own surveillance gear, portable night vision camera, a wireless audio recorder, and his own eyes, watching from above in the narrow crawl space above my ceiling. It felt strange, lying there like bait in my own bed, under the roof I'd lived in since childhood. My room once full of poetry books, fairy lights, and the soft smells of jasmine lotion now felt like a hunting ground. Only this time, I wasn't the deer. I lay beneath the covers, eyes mostly shut, ears wide open. I didn't know what time it was exactly, but my body knew it was close. I felt it the way sailors once sensed storms before they touched the shore. The shift in energy, the pressure, the drop in temperature that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The wind scratched against the window like it was trying to warn me to 41 a.m. I focused on breathing, steady, controlled. I thought of Caleb just above me, lying belly down in the crawl space, monitoring the feed through his phone. He had promised he wouldn't let anything happen to me. I believed him. Still, part of me felt the dread coil in my gut like a living thing. 2:46 a.m. I heard it. A single step creaked outside the door. Then another. The light from the hallway, a soft, golden strip beneath the door suddenly disappeared. Click. The doorknob turned. I forced my eyes nearly closed, just enough to see through my lashes. The room was bathed in faint silver light from the moon, and that's when I saw her, Margaret. My stepmother. My nightmare made flesh. She was gliding into the room, her silhouette framed by the cold glow of night. Her movements were slow, calculated, comfortable, as if she'd done this before. She stood at the foot of my bed for a full 15 seconds. I counted them, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. Then she moved closer, silent and sure-footed, like a shadow with intent. In her hand was a small white rag, in the other a dark glass bottle. I recognized it instantly. It was the same bottle I had seen once in her bathroom cabinet, unlabeled, tucked behind her vitamins. A chemical smell had clung to it when I picked it up once out of curiosity. She was planning to drug me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge, to fight. But I knew I couldn't risk it, not yet. Caleb had warned me. Let her act, catch her red-handed, then move. So I stayed still, my body tight beneath the sheets, adrenaline burning under my skin like fire. Margaret leaned over me, so close I could smell that sickening lavender oil she always wore. Her breath was sweet, like cinnamon and decay. She leaned down until her mouth was just inches from my ear. "You'll sleep forever soon, sweetheart," she whispered. Quiet, peaceful, just like the others. That was it. The door exploded open. "Step away from her," Caleb shouted, his voice like a bullet through glass. Margaret shrieked, dropping the rag to the floor with a soft thud. Her hands went up in defense as Caleb stormed into the room, phone in hand, camera light blazing, capturing every detail her wild eyes, her trembling fingers, her guilt carved across her face like a scar. "What is this?" she gasped, staggering backward. "What are you doing in my house?" I sat up slowly. "You were about to drug me. We recorded everything. The footage, the audio, the camera in the vent. It's all there. You're finished." Her face twisted into something unrecognizable. Not fear, not shame, but fury. Pure, unfiltered rage. "You don't understand," she hissed, voice lowered, darker. "Your father, he doesn't deserve it. None of you do. You've lived such easy lives, always handed everything. You don't know what it's like to want and not have. To be invisible until you take something that finally feels yours." Before she could take another step, Caleb pulled out his phone and made the call. Precise. "This is Caleb Hart with Hart Security, reporting an attempted poisoning and identity fraud. Suspect is in custody. Address is 112 Willow Lane, Marlow, Massachusetts." Margaret backed into the corner, eyes darting for exits that didn't exist. She knew it was over. Still, her lips curled into a small, icy smile. "You think this ends with me?" she murmured. "There are more like me, men, women. We find the cracks, the lonely ones, the greedy ones. We fix the story. We take back what we're owed." The police arrived in less than 12 minutes. Flashing lights painted the walls red and blue. Officers swarmed in, professional and unreadable. They found the bottle and the rag, both laced with chloroform. They took fingerprints. They ran her aliases through their system. It all matched. Every lie she had told, every mask she had worn. Margaret Monroe, also known as Lisa Warner, Elise Calloway, two confirmed husbands, both dead under mysterious circumstances. Large insurance payouts. No surviving family. A ghost who built her life from the bones of others. But now she was flesh. Now she was caught. They led her out in handcuffs. She didn't resist. Not once. That morning, after hours of questioning, I sat in the kitchen with my father. He looked like a ghost drained, eyes hollow. I showed him the footage, the documents. Her other names dot her past. I never saw it. He said, over and over, "How could I not see it?" "You're not the first," I said gently. And you won't be the last. She was an expert. She studied people. He nodded slowly. You saved me. You saved yourself. Because I didn't look away. That night, for the first time in months, I slept. A deep, dreamless sleep. Margaret spent the night behind bars in Boston, where federal agents waited to speak with her about at least 3 other cold cases, spanning across Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and possibly London. But even as the house returned to silence, I knew this wasn't the end. Because she hadn't been lying. There were others. And one day, they'd come knocking. A week passed, then 2. And every morning I opened my eyes expecting to feel like myself again. But that version of me, Eliza Monroe, the literature graduate who brewed her coffee with cinnamon and still cried during sad films, was gone. In her place stood someone new, sharper, worn, awake. Trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it settles in quietly, in the way your body stiffens at harmless sounds, or how you check the locks 3 times even in broad daylight. I didn't cry after the night Margaret was arrested. I didn't scream or break anything. I just stopped waiting to feel safe. Margaret had been officially charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity theft. When federal agents swept in from Boston and later from Quantico, they confirmed what Caleb and I had already uncovered. 2 husbands dead, both deemed accidental at the time. No foul play suspected until now. It turns out Margaret had perfected the art of erasure. She knew just how much poison to use, just how close to push without tipping suspicion. The agents called her textbook Black Widow, a predator with patience. She wasn't even 45, and yet she'd spent the better part of 2 decades changing her name, crafting new identities like costumes, and slipping into people's lives with the grace of a serpent. Every marriage she entered was a countdown, every home a stepping stone. Her empire was built on silent sand obituaries. The story exploded in the media. Our house on Willow Lane became a local headline. Stepdaughter outs suspected serial con artist in chilling midnight footage. They showed the images from the police report Margaret in cuffs. The bottle of chloroform on my nightstand. Reporters waited outside the gate for 3 days before giving up. The neighbors stopped waving. My father, understandably, fell apart. He took an indefinite leave from his company. Most mornings, he wandered the house in a daze, pausing in rooms like he was trying to remember why he entered them. He offered to sell the house and start over somewhere quiet, Vermont, maybe New Hampshire, someplace that didn't reek of betrayal. But I told him no. I want to stay, I said. She doesn't get to own this place too. He didn't argue. He just nodded, shoulders heavy with shame. The first thing I did was take over the guest room. Margaret's room. I ripped the curtains down, repainted the walls, donated the furniture, burned the velvet robe she wore every morning, the lavender oil she always dabbed behind her ears, poured it down the drain. I even replaced the piano in the foyer with an old bookcase filled with detective novels and memoirs from women who refused to be broken. Erasing her was a form of therapy. And Caleb, he stayed. At first, it was just for a few nights, sleeping on the couch with his old army duffel bag tucked beneath his head. Then he brought his Labrador, Max a lopsided, graying dog with one ear that never stood quite right. Caleb started making coffee in the mornings, fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. He didn't ask to move in. He just stopped leaving. We didn't talk about our past. We didn't talk about what might come next. Not right away. It was enough to exist in the same space without the weight of expectation. He would brush past me in the hallway, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. And it was all the conversation we needed. We spent our evenings watching crime dramas and rolling our eyes at how wrong they always got the details. Sometimes we'd sit on the back porch with whiskey and talk about what scared us. Not the obvious things, but the quiet ones. Being forgotten, wasting time, becoming someone you didn't recognize. We weren't healing fast, but we were healing. Then, one chilly morning in late October, a letter arrived. No return address, no postage stamp, Just a plain white envelope tucked between the electric bill and a grocery flyer. At first, I thought it was junk, but inside was a photo of me, sleeping, not from the security footage we'd collected. This was new, taken from outside my bedroom window. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers trembled as I turned it over, looking for any identifying marks. But there was only one line written in a slanted, feminine hand. You stopped one of us. Not all. I stood there in the foyer, staring down at the picture for what felt like hours. The panic didn't hit right away. It crept in, inch by inch, like cold seeping through floorboards. When I showed it to Caleb, he didn't speak. He studied it, his eyes narrowing. Then he walked calmly to the drawer in the living room, took out his Glock, and checked the clip. Get your shoes, he said. We're going to Boston. At the bureau office, we sat in a secure room with Agent Dana Elridge, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. She looked at the photo, expression unreadable. Then she tapped her pen against the table. We've seen this before, she said. You're dealing with something bigger than one woman. There's a loose criminal syndicate, mostly women, some men. No fixed base, no central leader. They target wealthy or vulnerable individuals through relationships, then disappear. We call them the inheritance circle. The name chilled me, not because it sounded dramatic, but because it sounded real, intentional, practiced. Margaret had been part of a network, and someone else was watching me now. We'll open a protective file on you, Dana continued. And you're not alone in this. A few survivors have come forward, but we need help connecting the dots. Caleb looked at me. You up for it? I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, beyond the bureau building, into the city skyline. I thought about the women like Margaret. I thought about the photo, the rag soaked in chloroform, the calm, quiet way she had tried to erase me. Then I nodded. I'm in. And so, I joined the Bureau's civilian outreach unit. Not a badge, not a gun, just my name, my story, and my refusal to disappear. I read case files. I traced patterns. I helped other women who'd been told they were imagining things. I became the kind of woman who sees the storm before it hits. Because I'm no longer the girl who froze in bed while shadows loomed at 2:47 a.m. I'm Eliza Monroe, and I stopped a monster in my own home. Now, I'm coming for the rest.